We'll wait 1 more minute. Come on in, everyone. Thank you. Come on in, everyone. You coming?
They are busy doing what you want them to do.
Yeah, true. Network. Yeah, exactly. Now, I wanted to welcome everyone, and obviously welcome to country, to traditional owners, and pay my respects to the elders, past, present, and emerging. If you haven't noticed, we, being Jim and I, are extremely passionate about education. As you know, Jim's come out of recently as the Chancellor of Torrens University. I've been fortunate enough to be the chair of a school of 800 children, and it's always been quite fascinating to me about why are we noticing that a lot of our children want to go to uni, and there's a gap. And it's so noticeable that when I asked the question of Year 12, what I found was that they really didn't know, but they always said, look, we're all going to uni. So when it came to the moment, which is around about when, about 2 years from finalising, in other words, about Year 11, to finalise what they wanted to do, you found out that there were some that were actually thinking about travelling overseas, doing a gap year, working with the parents in the family business. But there was always that, there was a few that didn't know what to do. And I kept on pushing them, why aren't we doing the simple things like traineeships, apprenticeships, mechanics, plumbers, electricians, which, as TAFE Queensland know, I've been pushing that side. That's the part that made me extremely connected to this business of Australia-India business that Jim and I co-founded. And we realised that every time we went to an event, that there was a lot of networking, a lot of handshaking, a lot of cards being swapped, not much followed up. And what we realised is that doing a commercial deal was difficult. So we decided, well, we'll do a B2B. Yes, we do need support of government. That's a key element. You do need them. You need the structure, you need the policies, you need the procedures, you need the systems. But the point is that in the end, when you're trying to develop let's say, a different line of business, you're going to have a lot of passion and hang in there. And that's what Jim and I are doing. We're passionate about it. We're going to get on with it. And you know, one of the things that I've learned over time is that history actually guides you. And the reason why I got involved is because 100 years ago, in the 1920s, my parents were caught up in a war and they lost everything. Where did they get to? Year 6. Did they want to go any further? Of course they did. Did they have the opportunity? No. What did they do? They came to Australia. And what happened was, out of all of that, they became what I would call passionate citizens who carried with them their culture. And exactly the same thing is happening today with India. It's quite fascinating to watch. The Greeks, the Italians, the French, as they came here in the 1920s, the 1930s, the Hungarians in the 1950s, exactly the same thing is happening now. We're getting a lot of people coming in here. They're passionate about what they want to do. They're passionate about their country. They're passionate about education. And education is such a key element of taking people from where they are to a higher level. And they have the support of their family. That's the key element. And I know that the Indian diaspora has an amazing network, and they support each other to the point where they become business partners. And a Greek and an Indian is quite an unusual combination. But the point is that we're passionate. We're passionate about what we're doing. So having had the degree myself, I've always wondered what's next. And I've had to take that into a passionate area, which is into education, into school, that my father started in 4 other guys, 1958 they started, they did the church thing, and then they created the school in 1983, and guess what? They weren't qualified. They didn't have any type of degrees. They were in 6th class, most of them. And they had no training, but they had one big thing, passion and culture. They're the two big things that drove them. And over time, they just built the structures around them with the right people, with lawyers, accountants, administrators, all that type of thing. But what ended up happening is that now we've got a school of 800, 2 different campuses, a church, and a lot of other investments. And that all came from nothing. In 1958, of 6 guys, he became directors, and only one of them had a qualification. He was the lawyer. So it's important that when you drive what we're trying to do here, or what we're not trying, we are doing it, we're actually doing it, is that we're going to have a few barriers, but we don't care about that. We're going to get on with it. And we know we've got a lot of support in the room here about the direction we're taking. So the intent has always been that when we did this, it was B2B, always going to be B2B and a commercially minded operation. It wasn't going to be anything else. And as Ridhi said, you know, TPCI approached me about 3 years ago over a coffee, and they said, look, I hear you're working on some apprenticeships. I said, yeah. I said, we want to talk to you about it because we have a problem. I said, what's the problem? I said, we don't have the people. I said, that's impossible. 1.4 billion people? You've got to be kidding me. 1.4 billion, I can understand if you've got 25 million, but 1.4 billion? He said, no, I'll tell you what's happening. The international hotels are coming down on us. Why? Because we just can't get skilled people to do the simple things, like serving, baristas, just the simple things. They just didn't have that basic stuff. So anyway, we decided, okay, I was a bit, let's say, nervous about it because I was always thinking, well, I need a plumber, an electrician, a carpenter, a mechanic. No, they redirected me on hospitality. And I thought, hang on, when I think about it, hospitality is so closely linked to tourism in this country and in India as well. If you don't have the right type of reception, then it's impossible for you to be able to get that person back the second time and the third time. So the passion for me has always been that I'm developing with Jim and our group, our council members, great supporters of what we're doing, that we want to be able to create the opportunities for people in business to come to us and say, look, I think we've got an opportunity here. Do you think you can help us out? We're all commercially minded. We've all run businesses, so we know exactly what to do. And we're very, very passionate about it. So with the support of TAFE, Queensland, we've been able to get to that first stage. And we're developing a Cert 3 hospitality program at the moment. And hopefully in the next month or two, we'll get through the, let's say, the policies and the procedures aspects, which is the hardest part about starting something under a, let's say, a government body who is going to be a little bit squeezed out and become a little bit more commercially minded. And that's our intent, is to help the government departments understand that they're actually helping us, but we're also helping them to expand the business. So that's that element of the reason why we started AIB, is, to me, like I said, I've been to, like Jim, he's to hundreds and hundreds of networking events, and you shake hands, you say hello, you swap cards, nothing happens after that. Not for us. Our job is to create a commercial operation, commercial projects where everyone, I state everyone, we're not in it to make billions, I can assure you. We're in there to just start this off so we all make a little bit of money. We're not in it for big dough, we just want to get this whole thing up and started. So out of all that, as you noticed on the invitation, I always thinking about different type of excellence centres. And the excellence centres, we started off with hospitality in Delhi, but then, strangely as it was, another person found out what I was up to down in Alapi, and they said, "Hey, listen, we've heard you've been playing around with a few things." I said, "Yes," and I explained to them about the exchange. We call it apprenticeship. I've been told I've got to call it traineeships, exchange program. So the exchange program, they were very interested in because the children in that part of India are leaving the farm. They're heading for the city. They can't survive. So they've got to make sure that they have that opportunity to grow themselves. So I said to them, "Oh, look, why don't you look at creating something in your area, in your actual area?" Then I realised he was talking about rice and talking about what can we do about rice because it's really polluting the area, because they put a match just like they do in Australia with the cane up north in years gone by. And then they said, "Well, we've heard about you can actually convert husks into biodiesel." I said, "Okay, well, innovation, that's what it's all about." So out of all that, we moved forward to a point where he said, "What about how do we keep the children in our area?" I said, "Well, the only way to do that is to create a commercial operation of some kind, whether it's 1, 2, 3, 4, or 5, whatever it is, you have to create the structure." So the structure that I was thinking of, and there's only a few people who know about it, but the 5 excellence centres are quite interesting, and there's a lot of people that are interested in the concept, mainly because it focuses on the key elements of, in ours, it's food and water. It's a big one. Food and water, and the practices of farming, which I'll leave Kim to talk about soil improvement later. But the whole intention is you have a block of land out of 1 acre, say you're getting 2 tonnes. There are methods now where you can get 4 or 5 tonnes without using chemicals, just using different technology. So that's the slant I took on one of the centres, and they were interested mainly because they could see that biodiesel was just one angle, but there are other things like rice husk plates. You can actually recycle it and make plates and cups, which you can use, as we know, in the large Indian weddings. And they're disposable. And it's coming off your farm. And that's the key. You're trying to sustain everything around you. And that's why Jim and I are passionate about the environment, about education, commercialisation, even local, biomass, chicken manure, recycling, putting it back in the soil, all being done locally. You can do all that locally if you've got the right structure. You just need support. You need a bit of government support. The whole intention is that of those, they're the 2 main arms. The third one, which I came up with, was Sports Academy, Olympics 2036, Brisbane 2032, young children being trained. Now, used in the 2032 Olympics, available in 36 in India. Now, Alapi, I keep on calling it Alapi, but Jim corrects me, I've got to say Alapi. Okay, so there's a lot of water down there. There's an opportunity for all the water sports down there in that part of India. So they're interested in looking at that, and I was talking earlier to people who know that in that part of India there are opportunities that will support communities. The fourth element that I was looking at is, like I said, the environment. And the environment really is not putting a match to the stubble, and recycling and regurgitating and soil improvement and all that type of thing. And the fifth one had to do with the actual, let's say, the condition, the body condition of the individuals, the health aspect, which can be developed in that area as well. So that the 5 centres of excellence, and I spoke to the Consul General, the High Commissioner about it, and the Consul General in Sydney, and they're really excited just to find out a little bit more about it because it can create a community. And it's not a huge investment, that's just the point. It comes down to education. And because I'm so passionate about education and had the opportunity of working in the agri industry, is that the combination of those and innovation going forward, because there's so much innovation happening as we speak. And whilst everyone talks about AI has been there anyway. It's just that it's accelerated. AI, Google's been around for more than 10 years, and it's an AI. It's just that now we're running at super speeds, and the analysis that comes out is just mind-boggling. I've done some research recently, and I found that you could finish a project that I would have taken a month in 5 minutes. As long as I supply the raw data, it will spit it out in 5 minutes. Something that it would have taken me a month to do. So, anyway, I'll talk about my book later, because I've got to let Kim to come to the stage, because he's to me, the epitome of someone who's been, I've been to India 20 times, Kim's been to India 31 times. So, he's actually done work in India. COVID came along, stopped it, and Jim and I want to give him the opportunity of taking leapfrogging all of that, coming forward and explain to us about the methods that they've come up with and all the other products he's working on. Thank you.
Little story about in 1956, my mum just finished nursing. A little 5'2", red-haired Irish girl from a dairy farm in Western Australia. She answered an ad in the paper for a passage to India, and she looked after Manning Clark's kids on the boat from Melbourne to Kolkata. She came back. Her friend, who was sort of like a gap year, her friend took off and said to Mum, "I can't stand the smells and the squalor, I'm going home." Her friend went home, left Mum. She travelled around India by herself in 1956 for 8 months, right across, and she had a box brownie with 12 exposures in it. She came home with that, with a photo of her in front of the Taj Mahal, the classic shot, and a book by Rudyard Kipling called Kim, and that was how I got my name. We're not. Well, it looks like the system's not working. What I might just say is that in agriculture, we're needing 5 things. So, yield, resource efficiency, deeper, softer soils, soil health, a value chain approach, and then a collection of the best management practices for each crop that you grow, so that you can continually improve the productivity and profitability of your enterprises. And that sort of approach has certainly tweaked the interest of the Indians when we went to Delhi in January, and IFFCO, the Indian Farmers Fertiliser Cooperative, a cooperative of 50 million farmer members, are very interested in that sort of knowledge, in the knowledge of quality assurance, of traceability, of addressing their local environmental needs, which go hand in hand with the productivity side of things as well. And what we'll do is we'll send my presentation to you guys as this is wrapped up. But you know, those are the key things that we're looking for. And the yield aspect of it is good, clean, highly productive seed. So planting seed that can grow the crop that'll meet the specifications of the end user. At the moment I'm doing work in industrial hemp industry for building materials. A great opportunity in Australia, and its biggest weakness at the moment is the processing side of things, but also at the moment we need good quality, good genetics in planting seed. Resource efficiency, we're talking about the efficiency of water, nutrients, so the macronutrients as well as the micronutrients. I'm working with a company in India that produces, they're the biggest producers of seaweed fertiliser. That was a company that was started by Ridhi Verma, who's a director of PepsiCo India. And they were wild harvesting seaweed and then extracting carrageenan out of it, which is a vegetarian food gelling agent. And then they had this byproduct, and they went, oh, what's this? And looked at the profile of that, and it's a highly nutritious and well-packed micronutrients in it. It's got gibberellins, auxins and cytokinins, natural plant growth promoters that target the leaf, the flowering and the root system of plants. And that technology it will be available through a joint venture that we're pulling together to work with a very special lady, Pia Winberg, down in Nowra, who produces seaweed out of the effluent from Dick Honan's ethanol plant, and produces health foods for us called Phyco Health. So the other one is deeper, softer soils. It's an old Bruce Cockcroft, who's a great soil scientist in Australia. He coined that term, and I think it's exactly right. It's not very scientific, but everybody knows what I mean when I say that. So, and the best thing is that Indian soils are very tired. They're good soils, but they're very tired. And we took, Jerry, my colleague over there, Jerry Gillespie, identified a technology that was first written up by an Oxford scholar in India, in Indore, in India, in 1930. And that was the lactobacillus and extended inoculum process that we use in our composting systems. You'll see in on the Stump Jump website, we'll share that around for you. That's the NGO that we've used to work in India. Rod Luke over there is one of the directors of Stump Jump as well, and we're trying to get all of the brain work and the ideas out of Jerry's head and second them over to Stump Jump. And we've got the opportunity there is to do recycling. So if you look at the website, and a fantastic little video of our project in West Bengal, near Kolkata, and the empowerment that it gave. There was young women there working that were very, there was an issue about working with waste. It was low paid, low sort of perception work. But to see those young women and the young fellow talking in that video and what it did to empower them as a composting business run by the self-help groups, which is a great vehicle in India, beautifully managed and run by groups of women in communities all over India. Very bureaucratic, which is one thing that the Indians also do very well. They have the same levels of government as Australia. The Westminster system is very understandable over there. And that was one of our great projects. The other, the fourth element of my 5 things is a value chain approach. So looking at the land and water that you're managing, the commodities that you're growing, so understanding which commodities you want to grow, then achieving scale. Now, in Australia, businesses achieve a level of scale either as businesses themselves or as cooperatives, and there's various other ways of achieving that scale, which then starts to help to reduce the reduce the cost of R&D and inputs, because you've got the scale to play in the marketplace and demand good, efficient supply of the needs, whether it's inputs. And we were at a grains conference the other day, really happy to hear the shifts that are happening now towards more sustainable practices. And this is where this recycling operation in India, that unfortunately the 70 villages that were going to pioneer it in India, COVID happened, and then working with Con over the last couple and Jim, we believe that we're going to be able to get that going again in India, and hopefully the not too distant future. And the value chain also means that you've got primary processing, manufacture, and the marketing of branded products, into a global market. Those 6 steps have to be linked. You have to link the best management practice that you do on the farm to the end market. And a good, you remember Richard Hinks. He was at Rabobank, and Richard said to me, he borrowed my slide. It's a value chain sort of slide which you can have a look when you have a look at the presentation. But that key was to say, and it's the white bits are the important bits. It's the linkages between those steps that need to be fostered and made sure that they're managed well. And that's where quality assurance and ESG and all of those sorts of elements that are being demanded by consumers, by companies and by markets, that's where those come. And then the last step is digital capacity to capture the best management practices. We developed a thing called Crop Check with a wonderful man, John Lacey, in the Riverina. And out of that, we've got a very simple methodology of grabbing a dozen or so best management practices that will lead to a more profitable crop, whether it's horticulture or cereals or whatever, crop or livestock. And by doing those, adhering to those best management practices, they also align with quality management. We did ISO 9000 accreditation on a farm that I managed for 16 years back in the 80s and 90s. And that was the process control. The people that understand quality assurance, you align those with your production system. And lo and behold, you've got traceability. You've got a continuously improving profitable business. And then the last thing to say then is to add the incredible power of things like spectral analysis, of the sorts of irrigation technology that Luke over there uses in crop mixes, incredible measuring of trunks, expansion and contraction with the circadian rhythms of trees and fruit trees, and really getting down to 20 microns of growth and making sure that you continue the growth of that plant through its life, and you'll get better quality fruit, more fruit, and a sustainable business. I think I'll just leave it there. And there's lots of great networking and talking going amongst yourselves. And,
is there anybody who's got any questions? Is he blowing your mind? He's incredibly knowledgeable and expert.
How big a nickname is AI doing on your business?
Yeah, well, it's a bit scary when you have to write a report. I just did some work in Timor-Leste and wrote this report, and then I just asked co-pilots to write me a report, and they did a better job in like a fraction of the time. It is quite scary. I'm also doing some work in Africa with business training. So for smallholder farmers in irrigation areas, their practices improve, they've got more product, what do they do with it? Where's the value-adding opportunities and that sort of thing. So it's a business planning sessions, and each of these in these areas in Mozambique, Tanzania and Zimbabwe, these growers just came together in groups, and there's a seedling business for fruit and vegetable growers. There's an animal feeds business. So they've come up with these ideas. They just need the tools to put a business plan together and start their own business. And that's what I think is the most exciting thing about the Apprenticeship Exchange program, is that these smart, skilled people, and I think it will be very much targeting the many people in India and elsewhere that have degrees but no jobs, and with those degrees they're not the sort of things that you can start a business with. Whereas a trade, bang. We hope to give them some training in business planning, business management, and they'll guarantee they'll go home and start a business. And our apprentices and what have you going over there for 3 month stints, I mean, what a fantastic opportunity for them. Global. Thank you very much.
To talk to us about the presentation she's about to make on behalf of the Lord Mayor of Brisbane.
Well, thank you very much, and I'm sorry that I can only be here for a very short time, but I am privileged to be here to represent our Lord Mayor, Adrian Schrinner, and of course many of you in this room know that Adrian is a very good friend to all businesses who are wanting particularly to make Brisbane their home base, and I think it's fantastic that you're meeting today to explore some of those opportunities. And we've been working very closely with a lot of our international countries. We have a number of sister cities across the world, but we also have our Brisbane Economic Development Agency, and that agency is there particularly to make sure that there is the ability for us to share what Brisbane can do in the business community, but also to support our local businesses to do business with international companies. So it's a great, I think that we've come a long way in Brisbane over the last 10 years, and many people who have had to go elsewhere to further their careers are now finding that they're able to do so right here in Brisbane, and that's something that we're very pleased about. But we also know that there's still a lot of work to be done, and we know that the world is a changing place, and so I think it's quite amazing that we're able to make sure that our local businesses do have that opportunity to meet other people. So I do hope you've had a very successful forum today. I know that it's been going all day, and I knew I couldn't get here earlier, but I'm thrilled to be able to join you at the very last minute. But more particularly to represent Adrian Schrinner. He was very keen that I came along to represent him. So I really want to bring his good wishes to you, but also to know that Brisbane is committed to making sure that we can do business here in Brisbane and across the world. So thanks very much. Thank you.
Can we thank you, Vicky? I think a lot of people don't actually appreciate some of the great work you've done in the whole of the Queensland-Brisbane India relationship and the functions that the Lord Mayor has organised. So Adrian Schrinner has been a big supporter of the Queensland-India relationship. He's done a fantastic job, and I think all of us here really appreciate the work he's done. And there are not many Lord Mayors from Australia that would have that reputation. And he's also had those, he still has those convention meetings coming up very shortly. So I'm very pleased that he asked you to represent him, and you're of course extremely well known for your connectivity with India and for pushing that agenda through. So very pleased that you found the time to come here and also show the commitment to it. And those of us that are involved with the Lord there, we have been to many of his India functions. There's a measure with me. So it's good that he has acknowledged this, and hopefully he would appreciate the unique nature of this initiative, which is about making business to business, making profitability. And that has not really been done in a way of always been done under guardianship of the government. This time it's business to business, but working alongside that. Very different. And that's a very important thing that has happened. And so I thank you for taking the time to come here. So we can probably go around the panel after that. Yes. Panel discussion.
Panel discussion.
Just tell me.
What?
Yeah.
Just tell me.
It's
that's
right at
okay.
that time.
Yeah.
Very much. Yeah. So if we get our panel up here. Our other panelists, let's start with on education. You might just like to say a few words about yourself and congratulations on your appointment.
Thank you very much, Jim, and can I also please congratulate you and Con and your committee on this initiative. We heard from the High Commissioner earlier how important it is. I think we've all seen that so it's okay to have a talk fest, but to actually get the key players together to make it happen is so important. So my name is Ridhi Verma, and I'm the recently appointed Chair of TAFE Queensland, and it's only been just on 2 months, and already I'm coming to understand just how big an organisation, how important an organisation TAFE Queensland is. And of course there are other TAFEs in other states. I think Queensland does it better, as always. But it is a very impressive organisation, has so much to offer Queensland and Australia and overseas. And I'm learning today very much so in India. So a very impressive organisation. There are roughly 60 odd campuses around Queensland, about 144,000 students, 4,300-ish staff. That we're hearing, of course, is the difficulty in getting students' visas to come.
Right, good point.
And you know, for TAFE Queensland and other educators, universities, no doubt, and businesses, you know, getting people into Australia to participate is very, very important. So that's a bit of a roadblock that needs to be overcome, hopefully quickly.
Thank you very much. And now we'll move to Paget. Over to you. And you're, of course, looking at primary industry development, of course, but just something about yourself first.
Okay, good afternoon. Congratulations to yourself, Jim, and Con with a great initiative there, and thank you for inviting me along today. It's fabulous to be here with you. Kim's just left the room. I love his romantic story of how he got his name Kim. Paget is my name, not quite so romantic. I was born in Malaysia, and my mother saw a little bloke one day in the Malacca Straits with Paget, so I'm just grateful it wasn't the Titanic or something. But I'm actually a co-founder of a semiconductor foundry business, in Australia's first semiconductor foundry here in Australia. Every single chip in Australia is imported, and chips are critical to AI, robotics, data centers, tech, medtech, and so forth. So it's a $250 million project, and we'll be making chips here in Australia, with sovereign capability within 3 years, 26 months. So, but I do have a background in agribusiness, and back in 2012, I was a co-founder of an agricultural business called Sundrop Farms, which is in Wikipedia if you chose to look it up. In fact, at the bottom where it shows credentials, external links is the video, and there was just 4 of us, and I'm introducing the project now. It's 200 people, and that project was about, we developed it really to show the UN how they could feed a lot of Africa. So there's no silver bullet for everything, but there's certainly ways you can help things. And this was, if they built 4 of these in, say, sub-Saharan African countries, it would be very interesting. What it is, the premise of the business is we take seawater. So this is today operating this business. It produces 27% of Australia's tomatoes, which are pesticide-free, and that's 17,000 tonnes a year. When we first came up with the idea, everyone thought we were from Mars or Saturn or something. We couldn't understand it for some reason, and we didn't really want to hang around expanding it forever. So we went to New York to get it funded with the larger project, which got it from KKR. But basically, we take seawater out of the St. Vincent Gulf. We built it out of Port Augusta, Illinois, 7-hour drive from and there's 2% fresh water on the planet, right? So we take seawater, we build, it's quite an impressive photo of the site if you look it up. We built the largest greenhouses in Australia, 20 hectares, 4 lots of 5 hectares. You put them separately in case a virus comes out in one, and you have to clean it out. But this is like controlled environment growing. This would suit India, where I am talking with Jim and Con on a project over there, and I've been for a few months. This would essentially, if we did this, not only would it produce fresh water that can be sold and that can be used by locals, it will create fresh food that can be sold and used by locals, and it will create jobs and training for people in the local environment, which is important. And it can create electricity too, so you just put it on a little turbine and we can make electricity from that too. So sensibly we take seawater we take the seawater, we desalinate it. It's about solar thermal energy, CSP, concentrated solar thermal power. So we take the seawater, we desalinate it using the sun. We put 250,000 mirrors on the ground that are calibrated with the sun. So as the sun moves, we take the heat of that, and we shot that up to a 300 meter solar thermal tower in the southern hemisphere, and built these greenhouses. And we chose Port Augusta because it has a thing there called DNI, direct natural irradiation, the right sort of sun levels. And India has, in various regions, has that too. So it would be great. So it's a controlled environment, and we went ahead and we built it, as I said today, produced 27% of Australia's tomatoes. And we chose tomatoes because after rice and after potatoes, it's the third largest eaten thing on the planet. And if you didn't have a 100% perfect tomato, it could go down another belt. You can make a sauce out of that, a salsa or a tomato sauce. I don't think a rice sauce or a potato sauce is as attractive. So it's quite an interesting project. The UN is still thinking about it, even though I built it 12 years ago. So I'm glad I didn't wait for them. And so that's my background. It would suit India very well. We'd love to sort of build a project there. Well, you only asked me about an hour and a half ago to join the panel, so I made some quick notes. So I'll rattle through them very quickly. I'd love to see the negotiations on a CEPA, Comprehensive Economic Partnership Agreement, expedited. The ECTA, or the ECTA, is a great start, but the CPA would provide a deeper integration and address non-tariff issues as well. We could reduce bureaucratic hurdles, so simplifying customs procedures, harmonising standards, and reducing red tape to facilitate trade. Promote investment, so offering tax incentives, streamlining investment approvals, and so forth. Enhance connectivity, so improve air and sea links to reduce transportation costs. Encouraging SME cooperations, joint ventures, technology transfers, and so forth. Addressing the skill gaps. In fact, we were talking earlier about putting in sort of courses and upskilling, so we've always got people to work in these facilities and keep providing the training to the learning behind it. Foster innovation, well, it's a pretty innovative project, and it's global first, it's in the Financial Times and Wall Street Journal when we do it. Fostering innovation, strengthening institutional frameworks, so establishing joint venture groups and forums for just trade, increasing awareness and improving any dispute resolution issues. So by implementing these measures, we can unlock the full potential of economic partnership between India and Australia, I think. So that's
very good. Thank you for that. That's very comprehensive. So we'll move to Ridhi now. Ridhi again, if you could just briefly introduce yourself, and then I'll ask you some questions.
Congratulations, Jim and Con, for starting this initiative. Thank you for the invite. Those who doesn't know me, I'm Ridhi Verma. I'm the current president for FICQ and also elected as an AMC member for Australian government for a 3-year term. I think all of the panelists people are from business. I'm not. I'm a community leader. I work for the community, and my background is I'm a scientist. I work in the medical devices, medical as a quality head. This is all about me, and Jim, you want to tell about the topic or?
Yes, I want to ask you, would you like to see more and less of tourism?
I'm delighted to contribute to this important conversation on strengthening Australia-India ties, especially in the vibrant and evolving sector of tourism. I've noted some points which I would like to bring it out. Tourism is not just a travel, it's all about connection, culture and shared stories. And in Australia-India context, we have so much potential to build on. So what I would like to see more of is, firstly, I would like to see more bilateral tourism campaigns, because both the countries have immense wealth of tourism, not only in the mainstream of land, also in the regional side. Secondly, more direct flight airline connectivity is the key for tourism, which the Minister has declared here, as we are getting sooner more direct connectivity between the two countries. FICQ also had a petition recently run for this direct flight to India, which we had taken to the next level, talking to the Air India and all other Qantas and Virgin from Australia too. So last week when I was attending an event, the Premier, I met the Premier and he said, we are almost there, so we are crossing our finger whether we will get it sooner or later, I don't know. We'll see how it goes. The third one is more cultural exchange through tourism. Often both countries have their speciality in their festivals, food, and other remote places to visit, to engage with the soul of each country. This is especially powerful in deepening the people-to-people ties. I do also love to see stronger industry partnership through tour operators, travel agents, and tourism boards, co-developing experiences like cricket-themed tours, heritage circuits, and even Bollywood film tourism in Australia. And finally, we need the visa process that should be a faster and a friendly process to increase the tourism towards both countries, and then we will have a repeat visitors and like students and retirees more often visiting to this country. India and Australia often promote themselves separately with a joint narrative could be more powerful. And Australia tourism strategies, and India is one of the fast-growing outbound tourism market, and it deserves targeted attention and investment. And also less focus on metro cities and more focus on the outbacks like Great Ocean Drive Road, and similarly in India not concentrating on Delhi or Mumbai, or other village side, countrysides are more beautiful for the Australian people to visit. And finally, we need to build a tourism relationship that is sustainable, culturally respectful, and resilient in the face of global challenges. To sum up, tourism is not just an economic driver, it's a bridge, and with the right vision, Australia and India can build one that's strong, inclusive, and future-ready. Thank you.
John Buchanan is, of course, well known to every one of us here. John, would you like to give a brief introduction to yourself and then?
Yes, John Buchanan. I was former Australian cricket coach, 99 to 2007, when India was certainly running second to us most times. I also have almost a great affinity with the city because I actually taught in TAFE, believe it or not. I was just telling Shelley back in about the mid-80s, and so I have a bit of an association with education and so on. And some of you might have been watching. I've just been sort of looking at watch all the time because it keeps obviously linking to my phone. But we've got a son and daughter-in-law who are in the hospital at the moment, just ready for birth of number 5 grandchild. So that's why I'm just sort of doing a little bit of that. I don't have a nervous twitch, you know, but there's a bit of that. And look, I was coming to Con's points about 5 various elements, and obviously the one that I probably have more affinity with would be sport and a little bit of health. And in the previous speakers this morning, or at least earlier this afternoon, just jumped into a couple of notes. So when you go to more or less of, you know, I think from a government's point of view, it just seems like there has to be a whole bipartisan approach to it, particularly when we talk about sport, we talk about deliveries. You know, it's something not only that we're leading to, but it's something that we're going to lead from and platform for. So, irrespective of which government happens to be occupying the seat at the time, it really needs that support. So, all the way through. So that kind of ties into the legacy. The Minister Powell talked about connection through flights, which took me to a much earlier story of my life as well when I was a professional cricketer. My second international flight was on Air India, and that was an experience, I must say. But anyway, Tata these days is now taking control, and you know, things are on the improve, hopefully. But look, out of what was said today, I just kind of bundled it into three areas. So if we want more of, or better exchange of, there is a whole thing around skills. And currently, apart from my normal business, which is around coaching and leadership, we run a business sports connection network. So one of the skills that we could exchange on is the whole business of administration, just running a business, how to do that better, and particularly when we talk about sports and organisations and so on. So there's that. From an earlier skills perspective, we've got a little Indian startup business called Ready Steady for Kids, and that's for 1.5 to 6 year olds, and that's about actually developing the fundamentals of movement for young children through sport. So we have 13 sports and take them through their sport. So if it ties to health, but also ties to sport, like anything in life, it would seem to me that the earlier that children are exposed to either a musical instrument, language, mathematics, or physical activity, the more likely they are to understand it, except for, this is the other part of the skill, is that we need very good trainers, coaches, and so on, particularly early on, that really give young children an enjoyment about what they're doing. So whether it's in the classroom or outside the classroom. If they're enjoying something, they'll continue to do it. They may not necessarily be world champions at it, but hopefully it imbues in them a lifelong desire to continue to do that. So that's one of the skill sets I think is really important is for India and us to be able to exchange on the basis of developing a love of whatever it is, but from my point of view, physical activity into sport for young children. That leads then into talent identification. And talent identification is again around a whole set of skills, around a whole set of sports, and probably from India's point of view, certainly from Australia's point of view these days, it's impossible to fund everything. It's impossible to fund, even though you'd love to do it, it's impossible to fund everything. So in the end, what the Sports Commission will be doing, even if they don't say it, is that they're backing certain horses. Horses not in the Olympics, but well, they are in equestrian, of course. But if you understand what I mean, they're going to back where they get the gold medals and where they're most likely to get the gold medals. And so therefore, that's where the funding is directed. So therefore, talent identification potentially ties into that. To assist that whole process is coaching. The quality of coaching makes all the difference to just as science and performance, just sports science, and Australia is world renowned for its capabilities in areas of good administrative exchange and support. Second kind of area is technology. Again, technology, as we mentioned, everywhere. But in sport these days, everything gets measured. Everything. So when you start training, workloads are measured. I was just talking to a chap at our event last night, and he said he, with a couple of partners, one being Mitchell Stark from his bowlers, that they're putting a chip on the fast bowler's arms, and now they will measure everything from bowling, arm speed, to just total workloads, and therefore mapping what is and what shouldn't be for bowlers, and that can be done at any age and all the way through. AI we've already talked about, but I think the smart sports, the smart coaches, the smart scientists embrace AI and understand that it's a tool to help them be better at what they're doing, and therefore they will be better for the athletes and for the teams. The whole business of, therefore, technology around training is going to really make a big difference in terms of athletic performance. It already is, but technology will impact on that. If we read and writing, I would be able to tell you one other story. That's what it is. Just in game. So if anybody follows tennis at the moment, and you look at Wimbledon, which is one of the most traditional sports going around, what they've done this year for the first time is take linesmen out of the equation. And so now it's just talk about technology. Now we've seen that in Australia and other events, but that's what technology is now going to do. While it might replace some human interaction in the sport, nonetheless it's still one of those things, because at elite sport it's now about rankings, it's around prize money, and it's around making sure that your decisions, whether you're an umpire, a referee, whatever, are as accurate as they can be, and so technology is going to play a significant role in that. Finally, infrastructure. I was talking with Venu. There's a man that's got all the data on the traffic systems out there. I was just saying to him, when you're driving along a street, don't you get caught at a red light sometimes, and you sit there and you're thinking, why aren't they changing? And I just get, where's the smart light system? Start talking to each other. And he tells me it's just not far away. And then of course we've got all our electric cars and vehicles that are going to talk to each other, so life becomes easier. But nonetheless, that comes back to, I guess, the infrastructure. And so, we're looking at stadiums into the future, 7 or 8 years away. Well, wow, isn't technology going to change from where it is today to where it is then? So how do we go about actually conceptualising what our stadium might be, or how it can be structured so that it can continue to adopt and adapt to what new technologies will be. Part of that whole infrastructure will be this broadcast media. So whether it's a camera, whether it's a phone, whatever it is, broadcast is going to dictate a heck of a lot of what happens later on off field, and it's an incredible medium that's going to impact all of us. I think, they talk about the Olympics, which is a major undertaking, and will have major impacts upon wherever it's placed. But it seems to me, potentially with technology, probably time zones come into this, but I can't see why you wouldn't be running events in a whole range of different countries. Rather than it being the impost of one country, why couldn't we actually have 4 or 5 different events in 4 or 5 different countries? But with technology, it's just all coordinated by a set of screens and then placed in front of us, because we just consume through the medium. So there are a couple of thoughts.
No, thanks very much. So the very last short and sharp thing that I'll ask each one of you, what is a very short and sharp take-home message to this group?
Take-home message, Jim, I think anything is possible within education. Technology is obviously driving a lot of that. And just following up on John's just comment there, we're talking about conducting hospitality training in India. TAFE does conduct a lot of its training on the internet. And obviously it's not for every particular course and trade, but certainly for many, part of that can be it can be conducted remotely. So I think take home is that whilst the demand in India is certainly very, very strong, how we deliver that is a key. We spoke about difficulty getting students into the country. It can be conducted either in India, which we're obviously going to do with the hospitality, or remotely. So I think let's not think that there are barriers there. Anything is possible with the delivery of education.
I think going back to your points, you want action. So the takeaway from here would be, well, what are you going to do about it? You know, as simple as that. How do you sign up? Where do you sign up? What do you do? How do we all make a contribution? Because again, I think if we are to take things forward, no matter whether it be through your organisation, whatever, if we continue to do it in a fragmented way, it gets diluted. It loses its power. So it seems pretty important for a lot of people in the room here, so harness the power of the room.
Take-home messages is like, there are a lot of companies like what you have started now, Jim, but focus, aim what you want to attain, and don't deviate from what your starting point is.
Yes, my closing would be, India is a country I love. I spent 14 years growing up there. We won a bit of a cricket tragedy today. I lived in Mumbai at the time, and it's going to be fascinating to see how your country grows over the next 10 years. You've got an amazing path ahead of you, and you're embracing these technologies from AI to semiconductors to education to children. So it's going to be really exciting. I look forward to it very much.
Well, thank you very much. We've finished exactly on time. Give them a big round of applause. Anyone? Yes, Ridhi.
There are two issues. One is on an educational front. Like TAF, India do not have a brand educationalist. But we have a very well structured infrastructure for education through industrial training institutes, engineering institutes, and also the government has taken a very, very big initiative of setting up a skill development agency as a government body. I was connected to that body about 5 years back, and they take people from various countries, like for Germany, for Israel, for Canada, train them in my city, Chennai, and connect them with the respective countries, bring them there, they take care of their expenditures and stay, and expose them to the local language. Like for example, in Germany, they teach Germany in India. Similarly, Israel and other places. So we have already a registered institute run by the government. So if TAF can connect it to there, our training process can take automatically. Right? They train and send here, and our responsibility is to place them on respective job opportunities. Well trained. So our Australian trainers can be accommodated in there at the government cost, and you can train them. So this will be a golden opportunity that every state has, but I have an exposure to my state, which I can showcase to you as a pilot project for you. Right? Now we have an MOU with that institute for providing nurses and aged care providers. Right? So all the formulas are very well structured. But if you are working at commercial proposition, you may not be able to reach the government because the government holds the business opportunities. It is very rare. Unlike in Australia, there the government has a pivotal role in running mega businesses. Small business they are not bothered, but all big businesses are featuring around the government organizations. So I had exposure to the secretaries and the government staffs, so I know the in-house story of the government functioning. So this is one very important area where we should really work it out. The second one is on the sports area. My suggestion, my question is, can we set up an Australian Academy for Sports in India? The idea is not towards Olympics. If we can have our Australian trainers located in different cities, we can show it either in Bangalore or Chennai, and draw the attention of the Indian youths, develop them to the international skills, the Olympic skills. What is that? So the type of technology mindset what we have, the scientific approach we make, all these things are little unfamiliar in Indian context. They are good players, they have got everything, all facilities. But the technology of the innovation, the science, if it is incorporated in the system, I can tell you that lots and lots of people from India can participate in the Olympics. So it's better to set up an Australian Academy for Sports. And if you need any help for sponsoring, I can get you a corporate sponsor for a funding for the project. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much for that. That's excellent. And welcome, Brian Kumar. Thank you. Did you want to say anything? Or you're
I think a really good point about remote training.
remote training?
That's very important. And the other comment about not having touch, having referees on, and we're all doing electronic testing is very big.
Okay. Did you want to say something?
Thank you. We won't take up too much time. So my name's Ross Mackay. I'm the General Manager of TAFE Queensland International Education. So that's a really great recommendation for us to follow up with you on. Maybe just to give some context for our position as TAFE Queensland is because we are primarily an institution for the Queensland community. When we do work overseas, we have to be very careful about where we put our investment, if that makes sense. So our strategy for working overseas and in India is to find the right partner and to work through that partnership to leverage some of those relationships that you're talking about. Because we don't want to use all of our investment spend, if you like, in the transactions costs of negotiating and getting bricks and mortar on the ground. So that's a really great recommendation, but probably just to highlight the strength of our relationship that's forming with partners on the ground in India. So that we can play to our respective strengths. But that experience will be very useful and will connect up between tools.
Yeah, I think that's where AIB can play a very, very major role in fostering that relationship. Yes, I agree with this.
All right, thanks. Thanks very much. So we now come to the last part of our event today. It's a very important part, and that's the launch of Pong's book. He's a man of many talents, and he's very modest about it, but actually it takes a lot of work and insight. And for those of you who follow LinkedIn, you'll see that he makes very regular comments on LinkedIn. So it's about innovate or disintegrate. I'm not into innovation. I'm not into disintegration, but I think it's a good time. So on that note, I'll hand over to Colin.
Thanks, Jim, for that introduction. When I thought about it, because everyone sees the word innovate, because innovation now is here. You've got no choice. Whichever way you look at it, AI is here, and then you've got to look on the other side of the ledger, which is cyber. So on one side it's extremely positive, and on the other side it's extremely negative. But the whole idea is that you're actually stepping up. You're getting out there. Anyway, I wrote the book, and first of all I'd like to thank two people, Jim and Jerry. Where's Jerry? Stick your hand up, Jerry. Jerry, stick your hand up. Thank you. These two gentlemen reviewed my book, and it was quite interesting how they wrote it, how they looked at it. because I read it on the basis that I've been around a couple of years and I've taken all that experience about looking at something like why did the Kodaks and the Polaroids and Silicon Valley Bank, why did they fail? I asked the question, and I kept on asking that question and asking the question of myself, why, when it comes down to it, it comes down to the policies, the procedures, the systems that are built in the company and the passion. So, I've written a few notes here. You wouldn't believe I've written a book, but I still need to have notes. One of the big things that I realised writing this book had an element of governance. Governance is, as we all know, such a huge part of what we're trying to do now. And policies that sit behind your business, it doesn't matter whether it's a company with a board or a committee, you're always going to have a chair, you're going to have members of the board, and you're supposed to have your minutes and your agendas and all that type of thing. But in the end, you have to sit down and say to yourself, well, why am I doing this? Why am I here? If I'm a board, then you've got personal liability. There's no difference. There is absolutely no difference between you being on a board that's got $1,000 turnover as compared to a public company that's got $10 billion worth of turnover. It's exactly the same liability. So you have to ensure that you have those structures sitting there. And I came to the realisation that, well, let's talk about a few case studies. So I put quite a few case studies in there, and it boiled down to what would you have done? You're at 10,000 feet. You're in a single engine plane. You see the prop. It's starting to stop. It stops. You're at 10,000 feet. There's three of us on the plane. I'm sitting on the right-hand side. I've got a pilot sitting there, and I've got my boss who just woke up. He's sitting in the back. And I'm saying to myself, well, I'm not supposed to see that prop. It's not supposed to be like this. Then it stops. And then you say to yourself, okay, so before I could even think, two guys had pulled out the maps and they'd worked out within about 30 seconds what they had to do. And one of the frightening parts is Mayday, Mayday, Mayday. You'll never forget it. It went straight through my body. And I said to myself, well, is it my time? And then the pilot, which was Philip Urin, said to me, well, we're going to have to do some swoops. I said, come on, you've got to be kidding. You're just flying straight. He said, no, we have to actually do some swoops because we're 100 kilometres from the airstrip of Warren. And he said, we're going to have to do it a few times. So they did that. And then I realised that the company's policy clicked into gear. And that was that every pilot, every bush pilot that we had in the company, Twine and Pastoral, had to go through training. And I'll never forget it, I'm sitting in the homestead at Gemelong Station near Forbes, and I hear this plane going over, and all of a sudden the plane engine cuts out. And what it was, the chief pilot puts them to a test, and they're only a few hundred feet above it. And that's the test. How quick can you get this plane under control? So the policies, the procedures, the systems clicked into gear within 30 seconds. We landed on the strip, and I'm not lying to you, from here to that wall over there. I got out of the plane, took my bag, and I made the critical decision about hopping in an ambulance that was waiting for us, and I said, take me to the closest pub. I had to de-stress. So, you know, you think about all the processes and the procedures and what you need to do under strain, stress. There's other occasions I had with Tynan where we had a cattle rustling operation that we had to go with on one of the big stations. I was called up and they said, listen, we've got a problem. I said, what's the problem? I said, well, lost some cattle. I said, what do you mean you lost some cattle? I said, it's been reported. First question. On the GM? Yeah, yes, we have. I said, who did? He said, well, we come to you first. I said, well, that's good, because I'm on a plane now. So I flew out there, went straight to the property, fronted the manager, asked him the question, and the shock of my life is, well, really, that's okay, we only lost a few head. I went around the corner, went to the area manager, and I said, listen, fire it. I said, the reason why is because the understanding of the business wasn't just the business itself, it was the culture of the business. It's the culture that clicks in again. Because if it happens once, it'll happen all the time. And they'll always be saying, it wasn't my fault. In reality, there should have been, as we all know, paddock checks and you know what the numbers are and how did they get over the fence. They showed me the fence was slightly leaning down. I saw, it's obviously they've been looking at this for a long time. I said, yes. Now, again, you have a policy, the culture is built in, you've got a governance practice, and it clicked into gear. Because I had a driver because I was the chief, but I have someone above me who's called the chairman and the owner, and he expects me to do the right thing. Well, the business boomed with the new manager for some reason, and I'm not going to say anything other than the fact that you need to make decisions on the spot at times to correct, let's say, unusual practices. So then there was a case study where I'm sitting there, and it was one of the rare occasions in the early part of my career. It was taken over backdoor takeover, what they call a backdoor takeover in those days. And what happened was the new owner came to me and said, hey, listen, I want you to sign this cheque. I said, no. And he said, well, do you know who I am? I said, yeah. Who am I? You're the owner. I said, exactly. But this is a public company. I said, I'm not signing. He said, well, you're going to remember this. So he threatened. And I said, that's okay. Not long after that, the top management who were involved in the company decided to totally walk out. There was about 20 senior executives that just got up and walked out and started another company. Now what happened was I refused, and the policies of the company were simple. You had to have backup documentation. There was no backup documentation. So then immediately, whoops, up goes my radar. That my governance practices was that, and I was young, that said immediately to me, well, hang on, someone has to authorise that at the senior level. It wasn't authorised. They're the new owner. What happened not long after that, my number 2 signed the document and ended up in jail for 5 years. And that's all comes down to being prepared for the awful things that happen around you. Now, that particular person left Australia, disappeared in Poland, and never caught him. And unfortunately, she, being the finance director, ended up being put into jail for 5 years. Out of all of this, I've learnt that you have to have measurements of some type, skills measurement. And we've been talking about TAFE and skills development. I work in the area of the higher level boards, looking at their skill sets. What are they? Looking at what they call skills metrics on your board. You know, if you've got 10 board members, what are they doing? Are they specialists in their particular area? How do you mix them in? You've got to be able to work together as a team. You've got to be efficient. And sometimes you just got to make sure that there's a rotation system that allows you to bring in fresh blood. And to me, the future of boards is moving very rapidly, where we're going to have, in 10 years, 20 years time, specialists in things like AI. You may end up with an AI director who has the dual role of AI and cyber. They'll be sitting on the boards because when you look at financial literacy, everyone on a board is supposed to understand what a P&L, balance sheet and cash flow is. They're supposed to. Not all of them do. And so my practice focuses on just showing them how to simply understand it, read it, and I've got a little, let's say, practice of training people in 7 minutes the concept of financial literacy in profit and loss, balance sheet, cash flow, KPIs, ratios, forward projections, budgets, and that all sits in a position where you can actually then look at performance, self-performance evaluation of your boards. In other words, you're doing it inside. You've got to start looking on the inside and measure yourself before others start to, let's say, look at you from the outside. So they're all the concepts that are built in the book, and I wrote it because I mentioned 100 years ago, earlier 100 years ago, the Middle East war. My father was a convenience store operator, wanted to do something better. He was only in his 20s, so he went across the mainland in Greece, became a barber. He started cutting hair on this island called Castellorza, and that we were at the time occupied by Italy. And he told me the story that he was told twice. The officer came in, had his hair cut, looked up and said, "You see those Greek soccer players? Change them to Italian." He said, "Okay." Didn't do anything. Comes in the second time, does exactly the same thing. So I thought I told you to pull them down. Said, "Okay, I'll do it." Came back and the third time he came up and said, "I'll shoot you. I'll shoot you right here and right now." He said, "Oh, it's time for me to leave." So unfortunately he had to leave, came to Australia, and he had a barber shop, effectively. And he was my first sight of an entrepreneur, because nothing, into Sydney, cutting the hair of soldiers coming off the warships, in the USA warships down in Sydney Harbour. Then he had his own little business in Coogee, transferred across to another one in Kingswood in the eastern suburbs. And then about 200 metres away, with 6 other guys, they built a church. The passion of religion in our community, which I know is in the Indian community very, very similar, is that they drove themselves uneducated, not knowing a drop about governance, not knowing anything about boards, not understanding what you should or shouldn't do. And that was they started the church in 58. They built the bigger church in 72, and then they've got 2 campuses, 800 children, and the passion was driven from something they came through a pretty difficult part of their life. But to me, the story is that you can do anything. You can do anything. All of us in some way, shape or form don't know that we're entrepreneurs. We're entrepreneurs in our own rights. And we're innovators. And this AI thing is accelerating a lot faster than what everyone thinks. But the point is that you can't control it. It's a controllable, positive product that I believe will be with us for many, many years. It'll change in shape. And I welcome anyone who wants to buy my book at any point in time. Sylvain will help you out over there in the little jacket. So you're welcome to ask any questions.
Any questions anyone wants to ask? No questions?
No,
That's
I
good.
read your book, Con, and I thought it was a great book. It's very interesting tales and experiences about it.
Thanks, Patrick. And by the way, it's 160 pages. I didn't write a book for 300 pages. My whole theme of this whole thing is simplicity. Why did it happen? Why do businesses crash? Why aren't we innovating? That's the story.
So, no further questions. Can you give Con a big round of applause? As we are going to sign off, I just wanted to also acknowledge So there's her support there, that's important. And I also want to acknowledge the support of Ram Mohan, who's not here right now. He's helped us as part of the team here. I think he's gone to another event, has he? So I just want to acknowledge those two. They've done a good job. And of course, thank you all for your attendance coming in today. And I think it's been a good event where the interaction has been good. So purchase a book and by all means network outside, have a drink, wine, non-wine, whatever, and enjoy yourselves. Thanks again, and let's give all ourselves a round of applause. Last but not least, of our very special guests, I'd also like to recognise Ridhi Verma from TCPI, which is the Indian commercial entity that forms the partnership together. So we're now at that point where our guests will move in and out as it comes through. And also as I look on the side there, I'd also like to recognise the Chair of Jobs Queensland. Us. Tends to be a bit shy, but he's there. So as we now move forward to our first session, I would like to invite His Excellency, Gopal Bagli, to say a few words. Over to you.
Thank you very much, Jim, and may I also begin, as is the tradition in Australia, by acknowledging the traditional custodians of the land where we meet and paying my respect to their elders, past, present and emerging, much as we do in part of the world where I come from. There are a number of distinguished guests over here, but may I also acknowledge the Honourable Shen Yue, Member of Parliament, Honourable Senator Paul Scar, and of course Honourable Dr. Christian Roman, and the new chair, the new incoming chair of TAFE Queensland, Ridhi, number of you from leaders in different fields, and of course our good friend Con is standing in the side and watching all of us with, as is the philosophy of Gita, with some detachment, I suppose. But what a great pleasure it is to be here today at this event by AIBPL, Australia India Business Pvt Ltd. I think what we are witnessing today is a very important step in imparting a strength to a growing dimension of Australia and India relationship. And I don't intend to inflict a long speech on you, but as Jim alluded in his opening remarks, I have been privileged to be associated with these two gentlemen from my early weeks in this tenure as the High Commissioner. When I arrived last year, January, one of my first visits was to Brisbane, and that's when we met, and we discussed what is being done and what could possibly be done to strengthen this very important cooperation between Australia and India in inculcating skills, developing the frameworks which will empower our youth in a very inclusive way. Empower them not just for jobs, but for futures that will contribute to not just their lives, their families, their communities, but to the relationship between India and Australia. And speaking of that relationship, I'm very happy to say, Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, that the comprehensive strategic partnership between India and Australia is exactly what it is called: comprehensive, strategic and partnership. It is not transactional, it is not for tomorrow, it is with a long-term vision, and what we are trying to do is to deliver the vision of our leaders. It is not a coincidence that in the last 3 years, our Prime Ministers have met in some form or the other 12 times. And our Foreign Ministers, well, as I sometimes say, I'm not counting anymore. Because it has already crossed or touched about 2 dozens. We have very robust architecture of dialogue between Australia and India at every level. In fact, Australia is a rare example for India. where we have an annual leaders summit. We have a framework dialogue between foreign ministers. We have a 2+2 dialogue which brings together the foreign ministers and defense minister of the two sides. And we have ministerial commissions on education, commerce, and renewable energy. And lo and behold, we are trying to add one more goal, which is on sports. And speaking of that, it is obviously natural that I visit the states of Australia, because just as in India, while the union government provides the policy direction and the overall guidance to the bilateral relationship, much of the action actually takes place in India as a states. Given the diversity, given the democratic framework that we have, both countries, this is no surprise that there is so much of energy, so much of contribution to the bilateral relationship, which comes from Australia and states. And yesterday when I was interacting with some representatives of the business community here, I was told by TIQ that Queensland's contribution to Australia's exports to India has grown in the past year or so by 257%. That's a significant thing. And that's what I meant when I said that this partnership is comprehensive. It's not just about geopolitics. It's not just about India and Australia's cooperation and convergence on the region that we share, the Indo-Pacific, our vision, our values of democracy that we cultivate and inculcate and promote. But it is also about bringing benefits to people in everyday life, people of both countries, but also not just our two countries, but to be individually and together bilaterally, but also through fora like G20 and Quad to be force for global good. And again, situated in Brisbane, I am aware that Queensland and Brisbane look out to the Eastern Pacific. And the value of that geographical position cannot be lost to someone coming from India, which of course is surrounded on sea by three sides, the peninsula, the Indian Ocean, the Bay of Bengal, and the Arabian Sea. When we extend cooperation to our partners in Indian Ocean and Pacific Ocean, to the countries that go through the vagaries of climate change, that face the dangers of natural disasters, I think there is a great value that India and Australia bring together in extending whatever we can to the countries that look up to us for inculcating and building their capacities, but also extending a helping hand in times when they need partners and countries like Australia and India to stand with them. All this requires continuous updation. All this requires continuous focus on building capacities in our youth, in the people who train the youth, in those who are in leadership position, and by those who are in the leadership position. And I'm very happy to note that today's initiative contributes precisely to building those capacities which will benefit our youth not just today, but also build the capacities for future. Every time I come to Queensland, every time I come to Brisbane or to regional Queensland like Townsville or Cairns or other areas, I do try and visit at least one education institution of prominence. And the point I try to make there when I interact with the leadership of those universities or institutes or with Indian students who are studying there, acquiring their degrees, that this interaction for education and skills is not a transactional exercise. It is just not about acquiring a degree or a qualification which will contribute to obtaining a respectful and dignified living. It is much more than that. Why it is much more than that? It's because it will create the bulwark, it will create the network when the youth of today, wherever they study in Australia, wherever they go in the future, they will not forget that link. And in fact, I draw the example of India's relationship with the United States and Europe. The way it has grown in terms of contribution by the techies, by the professionals who went to those destinations 40 years ago from the 1980s, and the way they contributed to bringing the economies closer together and building those partnerships. I see much of the same happening between India and Australia and picking up the momentum in the years to come. So once again, thank you for inviting me. Thank you for giving me this opportunity to be here with you today, albeit for a short time because I do have an engagement at 2:30, which is time for which is beyond my control, that above my pay grade. But I can assure you that the effort in that engagement is, of course, to further all that I spoke to you about, our cooperation in economy, cooperation in education, in skills, in training, and of course sports, for which Queensland is emerging as a favored destination for Indian partners. Thank you once again, and all the best for the rest of the day and the success of the effort that you have put together. Thank you.
Thank you, Your Excellency. And can also acknowledge Ridhi Verma, who's the new Chair of TAFE Queensland. It's good to have you here, particularly here in the State Conference. So as we now go to our next speaker, is the Honourable Shane Newman, the Federal Member from Blair, who has had a long association with the Australia-India relationship, Queensland-India relationship, and has really driven it with passion and commitment. So over to you, Shane.
Thanks, Jim. It's great I always do everything that Jim and Con tells me to do, because that's the safest thing to do. It's great to be here, and I do acknowledge the High Commissioner and my parliamentary colleagues at state and federal level, and I see Abby here, who looks after my finances in the Queensland branch of the Australian Labor Party, and Ash here, who tells me that he only ever got respect when he joined Queensland Cricket, despite his many books that he's written over the years. Look, it's great to be here. I want to acknowledge the Turrbal and Yuggera people who pay respects to elders past, present and emerging. Look, it's a great pleasure to be here at this particular event, and I'm representing, of course, the Australian Government and the Minister for Trade and Tourism, and my good mate, Senator Don Farrell. I'm also here, by the way, in my capacity in the last term. I think I will be this term as the Chair of the Parliamentary Joint Standing Committee on Foreign Affairs, Defence and Trade. And Jim kind of asked me to speak about the new roadmap for Australia's economic engagement with India and the opportunities for both us nationally as well as here in Queensland. And the Albanese government launched that roadmap in February this year, and maximising our trade opportunities and the benefit for our business and consumers. We often think about business, but we don't think about consumers, and that's really what the crucial thing. It's not just the food, it's the products, it's the services. That's really critical. I remember being in England talking to High Commissioner Stephen Smith, who was telling me so much about how the services, that's what the Brits were asking for. I thought they were asking for our rugby league and cricket coaches, but really it was our services, our accountants, our ICT specialists and our lawyers and bankers. That was interesting, but I'm not sure we can give cricket advice to the Indians, but anyway. But look, with a country with the world's now exceeding China, the world's most populous country, it is critical that Australia engages, and not just because of our long historical contacts, but India is our 5th largest two-way trading partner, our 4th largest exporter for goods and those services I mentioned. A trading relationship is enhanced by Australia's India Economic Cooperation and Trade Agreement, which has, I think, made a big difference for us. Now, thanks to that agreement, we expect the Australia-India trade to reach $50 billion by 2030. When I go to a school, I often say to kids in school, can you tell me if you've ever seen $1 million? Now, it's quite amazing the number of kids that have told me they've seen $1 million. I think Ipswich is richer, therefore, than I gave credit for. But that concept of $50 billion is an enormous sum of money in terms of our trade. Now, we're continuing to progress the negotiations with the Indian government on a new free trade agreement. Now, I'm not sure that they've Brexited anywhere, like the Brits, who are very keen, but I'm sure the Indian government is very keen to make sure our relationship is good. Now, we have, of course, opened a new centre for Australia-India relations in Sydney and the expansion of our diplomatic footprint in India, and it's critical. For too long we haven't done that sort of thing. Now, a new roadmap sets out a pathway to focus on our ongoing efforts. Two-way investment, working with the Indian Australian communities and businesses like this one here, and the partners that are sitting around this room. That's why all of you are critical. This is not an academic exercise and a bit of a chat and listen to what Con and Jim have to say. It's absolutely critical that you get behind this type of initiative. Now, that roadmap that I talked about had 400 consultations in every state and territory around the country. A key insight for that report is not only is that India is the fastest growing economy in the world, but it's growing in a way that complements Australia. And that's the critical thing that we haven't in the past acknowledged, that complementing. Now, India wants to be a world leader in terms of reduction of clean energy and advanced manufacturing. And we are well positioned, given our resources, our critical minerals, and of course, our skills and talents. India wants to diversify its foreign investment sources and store up and secure its energy security in light of the instability in the Middle East. And this represents an opportunity for Australian gas, for example, a real opportunity for us. Now, the consumer class in both countries are growing. I was just saying before, we often don't recognise the growth in Australia's population. I might have said to Nick, wherever Nick is around the room, Nick and I are having a yarn about the number of doctors and nurses and allied health professionals here in South East Queensland. But we are seeing our population grow in the same way the Indian population is growing. And as a result of that, this is driving our economic growth and development. We've got to get the productivity right. Looking forward to the round table in August. I've got one in Blair as well. Now, the trade subcommittee of that committee that I said before undertook some inquiries into those consumer goods, international education and tourism. And I would commend that inquiry. Now, lest anyone thinks that Paul Scar and I are always against one another and at each other's throats, we always see at various multicultural events. I'm telling you, despite what you see at question time, which sometimes is a little akin to World Championship Wrestling, Michael McCormack, the former Deputy Prime Minister, and Senator Deb O'Neill worked brilliantly and beautifully together on that trade subcommittee report. There are 2 reports on international tourism and education. I would commend those reports to you. They are terrific reports. They're 2 of the best reports I've ever seen. And they deal with this issue and the engagement between Australia and India and our international integration. Education's critical, as is tourism. Now, the strengths we have together complement. Now, the roadmap identifies 4 super highways of growth. That super highway, we love that word, don't we? I remember Maxine McHugh on, I think it was Lateline, talking about this internet business because I'm old, about 30 years ago, what's this internet business? Super highway. We love it, but it's in there, let me tell you. I don't know who drafted up, sorry to the public servants in the room. Super highways of growth in key sectors, natural strength, clean energy, education, which I alluded to said before, and skills, agribusiness and tourism. Read those reports, by the way. It identifies 50 specific opportunities to focus and accelerate our engagement across those fields. Now, I want to acknowledge that the roadmap builds on the 2018 India Economic Strategy to 2035, which was critical under the previous coalition government, and that we are refining and adapting our approach on economic, environmental and geostrategic developments. Now, that report was led by someone with a surname that might be related to Jim here, another former secretary of the Department of Foreign Affairs and Trade and High Commissioner India, of course, and the brother, of course, of the Australia-India business co-founder, Jim Varghese, Peter Varghese. So it's important and timely that we acknowledge, can I just say, the incredible contribution of Jim and Peter to Australia-India relations over their long and distinguished careers in business and in public service. Now, we've got to boost our economic ties with India, and we've got to create jobs and opportunity for Australia. It's not all just helping India by the Indian Premier League, etc. We're not all just about that, and it's not just about sending our experts. We've got to benefit as well. Now, we've kick-started this ambitious plan. We're investing $16 million for an Australia-India Trade Investment Accelerator Fund and creating a better environment for Australian firms, small, medium and large, help them seize those commercial opportunities, to engage so that business can engage with government and find the opportunities. And we're investing $4 million in a friendship grants program known as My Tree, which is committed to enhancing the people-to-people and business-to-business and cultural links as well. So, what are the opportunities for Queensland? Now, I should get Christian up here to say about that, but these opportunities, there are massive, there are many. I know the Queensland government is targeting, the previous government and the current government, I commend them both, targeting India as a key market for trade and investment. India, I mentioned those figures before, India is more important to Queensland than India in a sense is to Australia because it's our 4th largest trading partner and our 3rd largest export market. We all think it's the diaspora High Commissioner is in Sydney and Melbourne, but Queensland, as the High Commissioner said, is even more important. So their goal over the next 5 to 10 years is to build existing trade, investments and strengths, mining, agribusiness, mining equipment, technology and service, tourism and education. Now we need to diversify into clean energy, biomedical sciences, health, entertainment and sport, of course. But we see our opportunity with the Olympics Games coming here in 2032. We see a real opportunity for Australia to leverage the partnership. Now the roadmap provides an interesting case study of Queensland ice cream business, Frosty Boy Australia, who are kicking goals in India. Now they're based in Yatala, so they're nowhere near the centre of the university out of Ipswich Way, but they're a leading manufacturer and a supplier of dessert, beverage, savoury and wellness powder products, and they took the big step of dedicated India office in 2013. Deep market research and understanding and a strategy of always staying agile and adapting. So they've been successful. It's an incredible success story if you read about it. Now I know the Queensland Premier David Christodoulou will lead a trade mission in India soon. I commend him for doing so. I understand it is to take representatives of Australian university sector, maybe cricket as well. I reckon Ash, you might get a gig, mate. Okay. So to go as well. So there's a great opportunity for this state, and the roadmap highlights a unique role. So we have incredible India diaspora, High Commissioner here that's driving our growth in this area. I want to finish on this note and say a couple of things about the Queensland things. We have, according to the figures that I've seen, around about 100,000, and Prithvi, you've got a big challenge as the president of FICQ, because there's about 100,000 people. Now I know I wish we had 100,000 members of the Labor Party here in Queensland, Abby, but I'm telling you, it's hard enough to wrangle the tens of thousands and supporters we have now. So there's a lot of big job you've got to do, Prithvi. But it's important that we harness the energy, all these different disparate groups, and the Indian community is the 3rd largest migrant group here in Queensland. Very, very visible. And I know that for a fact because if you're a politician, state or federal, you go to schools all the time. And you can see Indian faces in the Indian community. And if you're standing, I've just had a little thing we call the federal election. And if you're standing at a pre-poll or an election day, you know how many people from the Indian Australian community are voting in our elections. You know how important that is. If you're living in Ripley or Springfield or wherever. So this is incredible contribution the Indian community is making, but we need to understand and be more supportive here in Queensland as well as nationally. So I'm looking forward to working with Prithvi on the House of India project, which is a bipartisan project we've got here in Springfield, a $5.5 million commitment. But I'm looking forward to working with people like Maha and Senator Thambi and Jim Varghese, of course, Springfield City Group and Bob Sharpless and others. The government has already opened the Centre for Australian-India Relations in Parramatta, where there's a huge Indian diaspora. Andrew Charlton, I commend his book to you. Have you not read about his recently read book on Australian-Indian relations? Very well worth reading, by the way. So Australia is doing lots of thinking about this and a lot of acting, and so is Queensland. And we take this stuff really, really seriously. So I want to thank you very much for having me here today. The relationship has never been deeper and stronger than it is today. This commitment, I'm convinced, is a bipartisan commitment here in Australia. I don't think there's much difference at all between the major political parties, but we need to focus and accelerate our efforts. So listen to Jim. If you don't want to listen to Jim, listen to Peter. Thank you very much for having me.
Well, that was a really good speech, and just give him another round of applause. That's very good. Now, the format of today is informal, so it's not one of those functions where we all give formal speeches and you're all tied up and looking up. This is all about being relaxed and engaging. And I should just point out also that this is also a very unique event, because it's the first time that the private sector, that is the leadership company and the Indian commercial equivalent, have done a direct contact for trade and investment, working with the government, but not actually having been driven that way. So you've got both working together in the way it should be, and given what the High Commissioner was saying and what Shane Newman was saying, the opportunities for trade in India are enormous. We have just hit the right part at the right time, creating new mechanisms to accelerate trade. And I agree with the comments on Queensland. I've always been a strong advocate of Queensland, with everything from university to everything else. I can't speak for my younger brother. He was there for a meeting. So on that note, I'd like to now invite Senator Paul Scar. And he needs no introduction. He's got a very good presence right around Queensland, very strong in the multicultural community as well. So without further ado, Senator Paul, over to you.
Thanks very much, Jim. And I first would like to acknowledge our traditional owners and pay my respects to elders past, present and emerging, and note that I do that in the context of NAIDOC Week, which is a very, very important week on the Australian calendar. So we should make that recognition up front. I'd also like to note how great it was to see our friend the High Commissioner again in attendance at an event like this. And every time the High Commissioner visits Queensland, I always make 2 points to the High Commissioner. I'm sure my friend Shane Newman does exactly the same thing. First, I say you should be so proud of the contribution made by the Queensland Indian community here in Queensland. You should be so proud of that. And I also compliment the work of our Consul General Neetu, who I think is doing a wonderful job in Queensland as well. And when I think about the relationship between Australia and India, I think about the events I have written into my calendar, and I'm sure Shane's the same, for every Australia Day. They include citizenship ceremonies, they include festivals, activities to celebrate Australia. But the event we always go to in the evening is the joint Australia Day and India Republic Day event. And it's the event we always go to. It's the day India adopted its constitution, which has in it democratic values, just like our beautiful country. And to me, nothing could summarise, nothing could underline the connection between Australia and India more than celebrating those 2 days, our most important national day and also India's Republic Day. I would like to acknowledge my parliamentary colleague, Shane Newman, and no, Shane, everything you said I agree with. Apart maybe the commentary around Labor Party membership, but there are opportunities. There are opportunities elsewhere, and I invite you all to consider those opportunities.
Mine is much elder.
I also acknowledge the presence of my good friend Dr. Christian Rowan, who's here today representing David Crisafulli, the Premier, and note that Andrew Powell is also going to be attending and speaking to some of the opportunities for this relationship as we move towards 2032. I'd also like to really commend this initiative, and in doing so acknowledge Con and Jim, the founders of the Australia-India Business Pty Ltd. And thank you so much for the work both of you have undertaken over so many years in terms of advancing this critical relationship. And Con, I noted session 6, there's an ability to get your book, so I'm going to have to leave before then. But can I put in an order for the book? It seems very interesting, and I look forward to, as an avid reader, and I know Shane's an avid reader as well.
I read it already, mate.
Oh, you read it already? There you go. There you go. Read it already. There you go. But I look forward to reading it, and if I can put an order in for the book, and let me know where to send the cheque. So thank you very much. Okay. I'd also like, in the context of the fact we're meeting here at TAFE Queensland, to acknowledge the importance of the execution in September 2024 of an MOU between TAFE Queensland and AIBX Enterprise Pvt Ltd in relation to vocational education training. And that is absolute of Australia's relationship with India. And as Shane said, India is one of the fastest growing economies in the world, and in fact a 6.4% annual growth rate over the last 2 decades on average. That is just extraordinary. The Indian economy is in effect adding the value of the New Zealand economy every year, year-on-year growth at extraordinary levels. Second, the 5th largest economy in the world, and soon, in a matter of years, India will become, no doubt, the 3rd largest economy in the world, only behind the United States and China. Third, and this is incredibly important, I think, in terms of the dynamic nature of India and the opportunity between Australia and India, 2/3 of the Indian population is under the age of 35. 2/3. And that's an incredible statistic, and that demographic cohort will be the cohort that helps drive India's growth, but will also be the cohort that takes forward the relationship between Australia and India in decades to come. As Shane said, the relationship between Australia and India is complementary. It is complementary in so many ways, and we've spoken about our common values. It's also complementary in terms of Australia's endowment of natural resources and also our human capacity. So there's a real complementary relationship between Australia and India. And it's also complementary with respect to how we're progressing the relationship also at a security level, international security level, in terms of the Quad and other international arrangements, and also complementary in terms of the wonderful Indian diaspora, Australian Indian diaspora we have here. Second point I wanted to make was that this roadmap, this extremely important roadmap, and I do compliment Don Farrell, the Trade Minister, for progressing this. Now, Don's in the Senate. Senators are wonderful at getting things done. So Don's living testimony to that, and I consider Don a good friend, and I admire what he's done in the trade space. It's important to know, as Shane acknowledged generously, that this is a continuation of work that's been done by previous governments. So, as Shane mentioned, the India Economic Strategy was progressed by the wonderful Ridhi Verma. That was commissioned by the Department of Foreign Affairs and Trade under the coalition government, the previous coalition government. And on 2 April 2022, before the 2022 election, the Australia-India Economic Cooperation and Trade Agreement was entered into, which in effect meant that tariffs would no longer apply to 85% of the goods being exported from Australia to India, with the timeline to provide that would get down to 91% over 10 years. And in that regard, I also note Shane's comments about the review that's being undertaken. And that's important. So in effect, that agreement meant that $2 billion was saved in tariffs that would otherwise have been paid on exports from Australia to India. $2 billion by the end of 2025. So that's the economic impact in terms of that agreement. We've had elections, we've had a change in government, but there has been no change in terms of Australia progressing its relationship with India. We haven't missed a beat, and from my perspective, that underlines the bipartisan commitment to these endeavours. The last point I wanted to make was that, as Shane said, the roadmap provides for 4 key areas of potential opportunity: opportunities in clean energy, education and skills, agribusiness and tourism. And I want to touch on one case study, and Shane touched upon the ice cream company, which is a wonderful story. They should move from Yatala to Springfield. There's all sorts of opportunities in our region, so we should maybe we can go down and visit them and have an ice cream, Shane. I come from the mining industry, so before I entered into Parliament,